Hello and welcome back. This is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Today's video is a tabletop comparison of the Bushmaster ACR and really a generic AR15. So this one specifically is the Colt M4A1 SOCOM, which is, this one came out in 2016. It's a little bit different than the one that just came out in 2018. But this is going to serve sort of as a general AR-15, just sort of a run-of-the-mill AR-15. And really the question of this video is to say, is the ACR a viable replacement for the AR platform? And actually, this is sort of a new vein of kind of a small series I'm going to do. We've seen in recent years, I guess over the past 5 or so years, a lot of competitors tried to try to come out and dethrone the AR-15 platform. And I'm going to do a series of videos like this where I'm going to compare maybe some AR-15 replacements with the AR-15 to see if it really is a viable competitor. So without further ado, we're going to jump into that now. Okay, so a little bit of backstory on the ACR. So this was sort of the brainchild of Magpul, which came out with the Masada during its kind of R&D in 2008, 2009. Now, after the Masada's sort of further development, Bushmaster and Remington bought the rights to the design and then they improved upon it. And the one that we sort of are more familiar with is Bushmaster's offering of the ACR. ACR standing for Adaptive Combat Rifle. Now, this was really touted as something that would be revolutionary for the time, and actually when it came out on the commercial market in, I think it was 2010, 2011, it was actually sort of seen as a commercial flop. When it was released at SHOT Show, it had expectations of having barrel conversions for different calibers, and also was supposed to come out at a price point of around $1,500. Now, when this release, it just came out in the 5.56, and it wouldn't really be supported with aftermarket features or any of the barrel or caliber conversions, that it was really marketed as being one of the biggest things about it was the quick barrel removals, which it does have, and to be able to switch between calibers easily. Also, the MSRP when this first launched was like $2,700, and now today in 2018 the price on these has really come down to about the $1,700–$1,800 mark, so a little bit more affordable. And now in 2018 we're finally starting to see caliber conversions in the 450 Bushmaster and the 6.8 Remington. Anyway, with that sort of backing out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about how this stacks up against an AR-15. So let's start up here at the front end at the barrel. So the ACR comes in at a standard barrel length of 16.5 inches, and that's pretty much the same barrel length you're going to find on your standard AR-15. Now the ACR barrel is cold hammer forged, and it is a 1-in-9 twist. On your AR-15 variants, you can get anything like a 1-in-7, a 1-in-9, a 1-in-12. Of course, depending on what bullet grain or weight you want to shoot or what it'll stabilize the best, you can actually sort of mix and match and make that your own, whether you're building one or going to buy one off the shelf. This one by Colt does have the standard military 1-in-7 twist, and this is chrome line cold hammer forged as well. This particular one does have the cutout slot for the M203 grenade launcher, and does have the bayonet lug. Now here on this AR-15, which you're going to find on a lot of your off-the-shelf ARs, you do have the A2 birdcage flash hider, which is vented from the 3 to 9 o'clock, and then down here on the bottom it is basically shut off. That's to not allow gas to escape out the bottom, to kick up dust and all that sort of thing. Here on the ACR we have the AAC blackout flash hider, and it actually does have a quick adapter for certain types of suppressors. Now, suppressors are not really my forte, but there are essentially a certain line of suppressors that can just quickly snap on and off this ring here. It's kind of this ratcheted device. Now, this flash suppressor in and of itself does retail for about $100 and is actually regarded as being a really good option. So of course you can switch that out for anything else you want. Same with the AR-15, but we're just talking about what it comes with stock. Now, for the handguards, this is partly why I chose the SOCOM, because this does have the Knights Armament RAS, or the Rail Interface System, which is a quad rail sort of configuration. And of course, Knights, the The nice quad rails are what's used on the military M4s and M16s, which is a part of why this is sort of the SOCOM variant. This also does have the heavy barrel. Now the handguard on here is aluminum, and of course you can knock this pin out and drift this off, and that's how you will access the barrel, which I'll show you in a minute. Now, they are two separate pieces, so this is your quad rail here, and then of course you have the rail on the top, which travels the full length of the top of the receiver. Now here you will notice that this does have a gas regulator. It is a short stroke gas piston system, where here we have the direct gas impingement. So kind of going along with the price point, like I mentioned, this comes in at about the $1,700 range, which of course is not MSRP, but that's what you can expect to pay on these. Here on the SOCOM, you're looking at about similar in price point, about maybe $1,400 to $1,600 where you can find it, and the quad rail does come standard on it. Now, being direct gas impingement, it is a different operating system where basically gases will come directly back into the receiver via this gas tube, hit the gas key on top of the bolt carrier group and sending your bolt carrier to the rear. Whereas the piston, everything is kind of encapsulated up at the front of the action, and actually your gas and everything does not actually enter the receiver. So your benefits are it does keep the interior of the receiver cleaner, but you do have a little bit more complexity and a little bit more parts up here, and of course I will show you that more when I break this apart. Now the receiver halves on the ACR, your upper receiver is an aluminum alloy and the bottom is a polymer. On the standard AR15 you're going to get 7075 T6 aluminum, which is type 3 hard coat anodized. Which again is very standard of what you're going to find on a generic AR-15, whether you're doing DPMS, Core 15, M&P 15, AR-556, any of those, typically the configuration you're going to find. Now on the back here, that standard AR-15, if you're getting it in the carbine configuration, you will have a 6-position adjustable stock which collapses and expands. And of course it's riding along your buffer tube. Now of course, as many of you know, the buffer tube is essential because it does house your buffer and recoil spring, and of course your bolt carrier group will be traveling rearward towards the buffer tube when it's in action. So of course you have to have a buffer tube on here, so you can't implement any type of folder or anything to get rid of that. And if you want to run it as like a pistol or anything like that, of course, as many of you know, the buffer tube will still have to exist. You just won't have a stock on here in the back. Now the ACR is a little bit different, where it does not depend on any type of spring or buffer system in the stock. So not only does the stock not only can you, move it, collapse it like this to get different lengths of pull, but you can also adjust the comb height by pulling back and up, and you can of course fold the stock. So I can push on this and collapse the stock over, just making it a little bit easier to stow, and you can actually still operate and fire the ACR with the stock folded. You can get to the trigger just fine, and the stock kind of collapses down at an angle, clearing your ejection port. Now the controls on the ACR are all ambidextrous, so safety selector, magazine release, and bolt release here. And if I switch to the other side, safety selector, magazine release, and bolt release here. So fully ambidextrous. Now, of course, it will only eject out the right side, so you don't have sort of the ambi-eject feature like you would have on, say, like a Beretta ARX comes to mind. The AR-15 is generally going to have controls for a right-handed shooter. Now this particular one does have a safety selector on both sides, so it can be actuated from the left or the right hand. And if you get an AR-15 off the shelf that does not have this safety selector, you can always get it and install it yourself. It's not too difficult. Now your magazine release, of course, is set up only for a right-handed shooter, and as well as your bolt stop here. So you do not have ambidextrous controls on those, and in 99% of the time, I can't think of an AR-15 pattern that has reversible bolt stop and mag release, unless you get a dedicated left-hand AR-15 where the ejection port is on the other side of the receiver, and of course all of your controls are swapped. So If the ejection pattern is not an issue for you, this is a lot easier to use as a left-handed shooter than is the AR-15. Now, the pistol grip and everything on the lower receiver is all integrated as one piece, whereas AR-15, you can switch out your own grips. Of course, you can switch out your own stocks. You can switch out your own forends. On the ACR, you're sort of limited to what you have for the most part, so you are limited to this pistol grip. You can get the mag pull front end on what you would get as the standard ACR. This is the enhanced version. So on the standard, you will get a polymer M-lock and a non-folding fixed stock, which of course you can switch between those furniture pieces between these two. Or if you get the standard model, all you need to upgrade to the enhanced is getting this tri-rail fore end and then getting the collapsible and folding stock, which combined is going to cost you around the $500 range or so, last I checked. Now, as far as your sights go, most of your AR-15s are going to have an A2 gas block and fixed sight assembly. Now, you can get AR-15s that just have a gas block with a little rail space where you can run your front sight of anything you want, a flip sight like a Magpul, Imbus flip sight or anything like that. And then typically you can get these flat tops ARs. Some of them, like an A2, will have a fixed carry handle or an A1, but for the most part what you're going to get today on the market are these flat types that either come with a folding sight or they just come optics ready where you don't get any type of sights at all. Now the ACR does come also without any type of sights, so if you want to, you can get yourself a set of flip sights, or again, it's optic ready, and you can just get yourself a red dot or anything like that. And it's just a nice full-length travel up here at the top. And then here you have the standard flat top on top of the receiver. And of course, if you get a quad rail, you have a little gap here for your delta ring. There are some AR configurations where you can get it where, again, they're separate pieces, but they mesh up with each other nice, just like this one does. Now, the magazines on both, of course, are very usable. I have a Magpul here, and then I just have a Stanag mag here. And of course, they are usable in either configuration, no problem, not an issue with magazines at all. Now, the ACR is a very sort of beefy design. The AR-15, one of the best things about it is it's very sleek and very lightweight. So let's go ahead and jump into checking the weight on them and see what we give up on the ACR. So the AR-15 empty with no magazine inserted, let's go ahead and weigh that. And we're looking at 6 pounds 11 ounces, so just shy of 7 pounds. I don't know if you can read that. There you go, 6 pounds 11 ounces. Okay, and let's go ahead and weigh the ACR, and we are sitting at 8 pounds 5 ounces, so we are a little over 2 pounds heavier on the ACR. 2 pounds is a lot of weight. I mean, if you're honestly, that's like a third, if I'm doing my math right, that's about a third of the weight heavier. So the AR-15 is definitely lighter. And of course, I mean, you can really feel that picking up both and of course looking at them. So definitely, it's one thing you're gonna notice right away is the ACR is a little bit heavy for what it is. Okay, so the next thing I wanna try here is the trigger pull weight, starting here with the ACR. 6 pounds 5 ounces, and let's move over to the AR-15. 4 pounds 8 ounces, so definitely a lighter trigger on the ACR. Now let's bring in the triggers real quick and take a look at them. So on the ACR trigger, right when you start pulling, you immediately sort of hit resistance. Go ahead and it immediately goes right into a break. Go ahead and show you the reset here. Start to release, right there into a reset. So actually, the trigger, even though a little heavier, very quick reset, very quick pull, very, very nice. So this, on the AR-15, we just have a standard single stage trigger. So once you go straight into a pull, little take up, right into a break, reset, right there, immediate, just like the ACR. So actually a little bit lighter than the ACR. The take up and the reset is incredibly quick. So I would still say, I mean, the triggers are comparable. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about disassembly, field strip, and how easy it is to maintain. So the AR-15, you just have a cross pin here in the back. We'll go ahead and pull that out, and it does stay captive, bringing the two halves apart. I can go ahead and retract my bolt carrier to the rear. Charging handle comes out, and that is basically field stripped. If you want to, you can push out the front pivot pin like this, and then separate the two halves, and that is a field strip. Or you could go even further, take out the recoil spring and buffer, which is very simple, or further field strip the bolt carrier group, but this is just a quick disassembly for maintenance. Now let's go ahead and talk about the ACR. So right here in the back, you're going to have a pivot pin here as well, which I can go ahead and pull out, and it is captive just like on the AR15. Now with that out, I can go ahead and kind of hinge open both receiver halves like I did on the AR, and then you can grab your bolt carrier. Actually, the charging handle is going to reciprocate with it. Which of course in the AR15 it will not be reciprocating, so that's one other thing. So you will have a moving piece here, and you can also take this out and reverse it to the other side while I'm thinking about it. But if you go ahead and lock it into place and then just grab the bolt carrier group, then that'll allow you to extract that out the rear. And you will notice it does have a captive guide rod, recoil spring, and buffer. That's why you don't need that buffer tube system like the AR15 has. And if you want to, you can go ahead just like on the AR and remove this pivot pin and take the two halves apart just like on the AR15. Now if you want to switch out the stock, there's another pivot or another detent pin here which you can remove, and that'll allow you to drop out the stock, which you can exchange for that other one if you want to, or vice versa if you have the standard model. And then here on the rail system up here at the top, you can just remove that as well, and that will allow this system to come off as well. And that will expose your gas piston system and everything there. Now, if you want to remove the barrel, this is the quick barrel change system. You bring that up, push it into a little plunger here, and then give it a turn. Forgive me if I'm not, there it goes, down to the right, and then that will allow, I'm doing this right. There it goes. That will allow your quick change barrel. Now here is the piston system I was talking to you about. So a short stroke gas piston, gases are going to come through the barrel up through the gas block. This is your gas regulator, which you can change the amount of gas you want to allow in here, which will then drive this piston, which, as you can see it kind of moving there, will push it into the face of the bolt carrier, pushing it to the rear, short stroke gas piston. This system was made sort of, or how it kind of debuted on a mass production firearm, was on the early stages of World War II and the SVT-40 and then the G43. Very good system for its time. You do, again, have a little bit more complication, a little bit more parts involved here. And even though you are keeping gases out of the receiver, you do still need to maintain and clean your gas system, or if this continues to get fouled up and stuff, you'll have difficulty getting gases to sift through here and run your action, which again is the importance of the regulator. As it starts getting dirty, you allow more gas through, but you still do need to break it down and maintain it. Now, you can get a system like this for the AR15. They are generally more expensive, and again, you're moving your maintenance from inside the receiver up to the piston system. So some will argue it's worth it, some will argue it's not. Another thing it's going to do is add weight to the front end of the rifle, which you actually do feel on the ACR. The balance is front end heavy, and this is partly part of it also. Very large muzzle brake and a heavy barrel. So let's go ahead and discuss some takeaways here. And I didn't mention in the beginning of the video, this is just going to be strictly tabletop for right now on the different rifles we'll be looking at, just to give a feature, weight, size comparison, that sort of thing. Sort of the different components on the rifles, how easy they are to maintain, that sort of thing. Now in the spring, I will be revisiting all these rifles that I will be comparing to the AR15, and either one video of like a general shootout of like which one's better, or I will do a individual range comparison, for example the ACR versus the AR15. Or whichever, you know, other rifles, probably the Bren 805 will do, and the Robinson XCR, the Scar 16. So, you know, I'm going to be going through a lot of them to try and see which ones are good, viable competitors to the platform. But, sort of to recap, at least in this tabletop comparison, the question is the ACR a viable replacement or competitor for an AR-15? Well, yes and no, and I'll kind of go through that. So first of all, before anybody accuses me of being a fanboy on either platform, these are both my rifles and I enjoy them both very much, and they both have sort of the general place here. So is it a viable replacement for a military service sort of thing? I'm going to give that a no. But is it a good option to somebody who might have AR-15s or have really been, using AR-15s for years and want something that's a really good rifle that's a little bit different? ACR is an excellent option. That's exactly why I got it, and they are a great platform and a lot of fun to shoot. So let's go ahead and just sort of recap it. Weight is a big reason I think that it's not really a replacement. Keep in mind, both of these use the same magazines, 30 round detachable box magazines, or the higher capacity mags or drums. If you want to use them, that's fine. So your firepower is about the same. Being that the 5.56 or 223 is inherently a very controllable round, you don't really need the added benefit of the extra weight to help you with controllability or anything, especially on semi-automatic, which is sort of what we are reduced to on the civilian market. So that extra weight at 2 pounds is, in my opinion, a hindrance to the platform. Now, you do get that piston system, and piston-driven AR-15s are a little bit heavier, but you are not generally adding 2 full pounds of weight. Now, if we're talking price point for the consumer market, you are in about the $1,600–1,700 price range. If you want a good direct gas impingement AR-15 like this, you can really top out at some really good options for a little bit less in the $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 range. If you want to get into the Daniel Defenses or LWRCs, you can get a little bit higher. Now, gas piston AR-15s, if we're comparing pound for pound, a gas piston AR-15 will run you sort of in the neighborhood of the ACR. So you are going to get up to that $1,500 range. You can get a little bit cheaper in some places, but that's sort of your options there. Now, your modularity, you do get an edge here, so you can switch between hands, or a left-handed shooter would feel a lot more at home on the ACR as opposed to the AR-15. Like we mentioned, you can get some ambidextrous or ambi controllers in here. If you want that, or if you are a left-handed shooter, you can get a dedicated left-hand AR-15 that's available to you on the market. You can get a standard AR-15 platform and enhance it. You can get all internals and stuff like that. So the aftermarket on the AR platform is massive. On the ACR, not so much. Again, one of the biggest hindrances of the ACR was its lack of barrel changing ability and that sort of thing. Which they did in 2018, did come out with barrel conversions in the 450 Bushmaster and the 6.8 Remington, and actually a new ACR carbine in and of itself is coming out to the market. Now, the problem is those conversion kits are MSRPing at about the $700 range, which is really high for a conversion kit. Keep in mind, you can get AR-15s and 300 Blackout 7.62x39. Of course, the 5.56, 9mm. I mean, there's a lot of caliber options on the AR, and if you want to jump up to an AR-10, you're in 308. Of course, you can't really switch between an AR-15 and an AR-10 pattern, but if you want to, for $700 or less, you can easily get into a complete upper and actually even make it even quicker to switch it out just by drifting 2 pins out and throwing your other caliber upper on. As long as your controls on the lower receiver will handle the caliber you're jumping up to, buffer spring, and all that. So you may have to do some modifying on the lower just a little bit too. Whereas on the ACR, you did notice we did have to completely strip the rifle, take off the handguard, thread off the barrel using the little barrel lever, which is very clever. But again, if we're talking $700, no reason why you can't just get a dedicated upper to the caliber you want to convert to on an AR. So, is the ACR overall, what do I give it? A fun alternative, but if you had to just have one, still I would go with the AR-15 on this one. But guys, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, whether you agree or disagree with me. I would like to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, please let me know by hitting a like button. If you want to see more videos like this or the other comparisons I will have coming up on viable replacements for the AR, go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications so you can see those videos come up when they're done. Anyway, I will leave you guys with that. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV, and I will see you next time.